Welcome back to the educational video series on winemaking for beginners. In this lesson 3 lecture video, we will cover sanitation, cleaning protocols, yeast in more detail, summary of the fermentation process, stabilization products, and fining products. Now let's talk a little bit about sanitation. Sanitation is one of the most important parts of winemaking. Most wine faults are a result of improper cleaning and sanitizing. Any and all equipment that contacts wine or juice must be cleaned and sanitized prior to using it. There are a number of suitable products available for cleaning your equipment. Only use products that were specifically designed for use in winemaking. These products are strong oxidizers or alkalis, so rubber gloves are recommended when using these cleaners. After using cleaners, the equipment should be rinsed well. The following cleaner requires rinsing and further sanitization. Diversol is a powerful cleaner, but it is chlorine-based, so it has the possibility of creating TCA, which is trichloroanisole. I have used this product for many years with absolutely no problem with TCA, but I rinse everything it comes into contact with very well, and I never let it get close to my corks. I feel that the reward of having a very powerful cleaner to clean my equipment outweighs the risk of TCA, but I really do need to disclose this risk. The following cleaners are advertised as no rinse, and they are Starsan Sanitizer, which is a sterilizer that is acid-based, and SaniClean, which is a cleaner and a sanitizer, also acid-based. There are also a number of other products out there for winemaking that are used as cleaners and sanitizers. However, do not use any other household cleaners like bleach, dish soap, laundry soap, petroleum-based solvents, or household spray cleaners. These products are typically toxic to ingest. They are also difficult to remove the residue from your winemaking equipment and can contaminate your wine. The use of bleach in winemaking is generally discouraged due to its potential to contribute to the corked wine aroma defect, also known as TCA, as I mentioned earlier, trichloroanisole. This defect can affect the quality and aroma of the wine, leading to undesirable musty and wet cardboard aromas. Bleach can react with certain types of mold, and this metabolizes into TCA. Let's talk about potassium metabisulfite. Potassium metabisulfite is a sanitizer and preservative used in the food and wine industry. It is also commonly referred to as sulfite and SO2. In winemaking, it is commonly used to sanitize winemaking equipment, and added to the wine, it acts as a preservative. SO2 helps to prevent unwanted bacteria, mold, and other organisms that can infect your wine. It also acts as an antioxidant to reduce the chances of your wine becoming oxidized. This oxidization will cause those bruised apple aromas in your wine, and it will cause also a bitterness in your wine. In the practical session that follows, we will make up a 2.5% sulfite solution that we will use during the bottling process. So you'll see just how easy it is to make that solution up. Now, about 1% of the people in general are sensitive to sulfites to some degree, and even a smaller percentage of people are allergic to them. People with asthma have a greater chance of being sensitive or allergic to sulfites. Now, the reason that I mention this is because if you fall into this category, it is possible to make wine without using sulfites. But just know that the best before date of your wine will be measured in months and not years. Also, without sulfite additions, the chance of encountering problems and infections from unwanted organisms during the winemaking process will be significantly higher. So, we also need to clean our bottles and carboys. So I'm going to describe a typical cleaning procedure that I use for cleaning carboys and bottles using Diversol. If you choose to use a different cleaner or sanitizer, just use it instead of the Diversol and follow the manufacturer's recommended instructions for their product. It is highly recommended that you clean your equipment immediately after use. Follow manufacturer's instructions carefully, as these can be dangerous chemicals. For example, with the Diversol, add 1 tablespoon of Diversol to 4 liters of warm water. Shake and rotate the solution throughout the carboy, and then pour the contents of the container into another container in order to clean other equipment that you've been using, such as bubblers, hoses, wands, etc. Remember to thoroughly rinse the carboy with clean water and any of the other equipment that you've had that has come into contact with the Diversol. Once clean and drained, add some potassium metabisulfite solution, which is a sterilizer, to your carboy. Then seal your carboy with either a rubber stopper or plastic wrap secured with a rubber band and store it for future use. When stored like this, afterwards a simple warm water wash and they are ready for use. The bottles should be rinsed and dried after you empty them. This will make cleaning them prior to bottling so much easier. To clean bottles, mix the Diversol in hot water in a laundry tub. If you don't have a laundry tub, you can use your kitchen sink. Fill the sink or laundry tub about 3/4 full. Add Diversol and mix it into the water. Diversol will dissolve quickly. Then fill your bottles with the solution and let them soak for about 1 hour. Rinsing the bottles well with warm water, both inside and out, after they soaked. A bottle washer makes this job so much easier, especially if you're washing more than 30 bottles. Once the bottles are clean and rinsed with warm water after using the Diversol solution, they should be sanitized with a 2.5% sulfite solution as follows. Line up all of the clean bottles and using a small funnel, pour in about 1/4 cup of the 2.5% sulfite solution into the first bottle. Then take that first bottle and pour that solution into the second bottle and repeat. If you have a bottle sulfiter, pour about 1/2 cup of that 2.5% solution into the sulfiter and dose each bottle with the solution. In any case, any extra sulfite solution should be emptied from the wine bottles by turning them upside down or putting them on a bottle to drain. You do not have to rinse the sulfite solution from these bottles. Any residual solution in the bottles is going to act as a preservative for your wine once you put wine in there and bottle them. It is very important that we talk about yeast. Yeast is a living organism. They occur naturally pretty much everywhere. There are thousands of different strains of yeast in our environment. They live in soils, on vegetation, and their spores are airborne. Yeasts are present on grapes, and if you just crush grapes, they will eventually begin to ferment all on their own. The problem is that not all the yeasts that are out there are good for wine, and you have no idea if those wild yeasts that are going to produce a quality wine. So the cultured yeast used in winemaking have been collected and isolated from the soils of the great winemaking regions from around the world. Each soil sample could contain many different varieties of yeast. Through a scientific process, the different varieties of yeast were separated and cultured. A wine was made using each variety to determine its suitability for winemaking with different grape varietals. The characteristics that each grape or each yeast contributed to the wine was also carefully scientifically analyzed. It has taken many decades to get to the point where we are today, where we have the opportunity to select a specific yeast that is best suited for a specific wine grape varietal, and which will also yield desired attributes to the wine that the winemaker wishes to achieve. Yeast can contribute up to 20% of the flavor and aromatic profiles of wine in addition to the other attributes that they contribute. So selecting the right type of yeast is quite important. So we now have access to hundreds of high-quality freeze-dried yeast varieties at our disposal for winemaking. Yeast require certain micro and macronutrients to complete a fermentation. Wine kit manufacturers have already added these into the kits prior to packaging. Now, as long as you use a supplied yeast, there really isn't any further need to add anything else. However, to improve the fermentation process, we did rehydrate the yeast with GoFerm, and we added a small amount of Fermate O. Different yeast will have slightly different nutrient requirements, and with some yeast will need a lot more nutrients than others. Now, when you get to the point where you wish to use different yeast, you might need to add small amounts of additional complex nutrients like Fermate O to ensure that you get a proper fermentation and the yeast is healthy throughout the process. The nutrients in grapes are referred to as yeast assimilable nitrogen, also referred to as simply YAN. It is critical for yeast growth and fermentation in the grapes. With grapes, the nutrient content varies widely between different varietals and, more importantly, the wine growing regions. Some regions may only produce grapes with a YAN of about 60, while you may need a YAN as high as 200 to complete the fermentation for a specific yeast varietal and grape combo. These differences make the importance of adding nutrients more significant. A yeast without adequate nutrients becomes stressed, and when that happens, they can contribute off aromas and flavors to the wine. There is also the possibility that the yeast will not be able to complete the fermentation without adequate nutrients. This is referred to as a stuck fermentation. It is challenging to get a stuck fermentation restarted, so prevention through proper yeast nutrient and management is important. The Scott Lab Winemaking Handbook is an excellent resource for yeast selection and yeast nutrients. It is a valuable resource for all things related to winemaking. We've provided a link to the Scott Lab Handbook in our description down below that you can download to use for your own purposes. We talked a bit about the fermentation process in the first lesson. Now we're going to review it because of its importance in the winemaking process. The first stage is the inoculation phase. This is where the GoFerm, we need 7.5 grams of it for every yeast packet, which contains 5 grams of yeast. They are both added to about 250 mils of warm water to facilitate rehydration. Rehydrating the yeast this way increases the viability of the yeast by over 50% compared to just sprinkling it on the top of the juice. Stir the GoFerm into 37 degrees Celsius warm water and then stir in the yeast. Let this slurry sit for about 20 minutes. Then begin the acclimation process of adding the juice gradually in stages, being careful not to change the temperature of the yeast slurry by more than 10 degrees Celsius at a time. The acclimation process does two things. It gradually brings the temperature of the wine yeast slurry to the same temperature as the juice. It also introduces some juice, which is higher in sugar than the slurry, to get the yeast acclimatized to thriving in a high sugar environment. Once a yeast slurry is close to the same temperature as the juice and shows sign of active fermentation, which is bubbling or foaming, pour it into the juice and let it sit. This completes the inoculation phase. The second stage is called the yeast lag phase. This lasts about 24 hours, and during this stage, virtually nothing really happens that you can see. But the yeast is rapidly reproducing and multiplying itself by a few hundred times. This continues until the yeast is at a critical mass, at which point in time the fermentation will actually begin. The GoFerm provides many of the micronutrients that the yeast needs to facilitate the lag phase or its reproduction. The third and final stage is the fermentation phase. The small amount of fermented oil that we added during the rehydration process adds additional micronutrients to it to help the yeast complete the fermentation process. During this phase, the yeast turns its energy into converting sugars into alcohol, carbon dioxide, CO2 gas, and heat. The release of CO2 gas provides the first clues that there is an active fermentation going on. For fresh grape fermentation to complete, the yeast must have extra nutrients added to maintain its health throughout the fermentation. However, all wine kits, like we mentioned earlier, have had these nutrients added during the manufacturing process. So with kits, there's nothing that you have to add. The CO2 gas can be seen as bubbles rising to the surface of your must. You will also see a noticeable change in color and turbidity, like the cloudiness that's in the wines, as the fermentation progresses. This is completely normal. Usually what happens is the must that you're fermenting, specifically with the white wines, is going to go from a kind of a cloudy amber color to more of a milky light yellow color. And this is a normal thing for it to happen. The fermentation process with kits typically takes about 1 to 2 weeks to complete. Okay, so now the fermentation is complete, so we're going to talk about fining products. There are a number of fining products on the market for use in winemaking. The two that we're going to talk about specifically today are included in the kit. Kieselol and chitosan are the two fining agents that play a vital role in the winemaking process. While Kieselol acts as a flexible fining agent, effectively removing phenolics and peptides, chitosan helps in removing tannins and proteins. Together, these finding agents work harmoniously to ensure the clarity and stability of the wine, resulting in a visually appealing and high-quality final product. Let's start with describing Kiesersolve. It is a negatively charged finding agent derived from silicon dioxide, and it is often used in conjunction with other finding agents like chitosan. Kiesersolve acts as a flexible finding agent, effectively removing unwanted compounds and phenolics and peptides in the wine. To add Kiesersolve to the wine, gently stir it in for about 20 seconds. Afterwards, it is recommended to wait at least an hour, but no more than 24 hours before adding the chitosan. This waiting period allows the Kiesersolve to bind to the positively charged particles in the wine. So it's important that we give it a period of time so that Kiesersolve that's in there, those particles of Kiesersolve, are able to find up and marry up to the proper positively charged particles in the wine. So over the next 12 to 48 hours, Kiesersolve helps in cleaning the wine, resulting in a brilliant, clear, and visually appearing final product. So what happens during that period of time is those agents, those particles that it binds with, will actually drop out and settle to the bottom. Now let's move on to the chitosan. It's a positively charged particle, so it's going to attract the negative particles in that wine. So this is how they work in conjunction with each other. It is made from chitin, a compound that's found in the exoskeletons of crustaceans like shrimp, crabs, and lobsters. Chitosan is known for its ability to attract and bind with negatively charged particles in the wine, such as tannins and proteins. By doing so, chitosan helps to remove these unwanted compounds, improving the wine's clarity and stability. When using chitosan, it is critical to add it after the Kiesersolve has had a chance to bind for a minimum of 1 hour. Now, if you add them both at the same time, one is positive, one is negative, they're just going to bind up together and settle out, and they're going to leave all the other stuff in your wine there that you really want to settle out. It's just going to stay in there. So you do have to have that period of time to find them marry up to their opposite partners. Once they're bound up, it's a semi-permanent bond, and then when you add the chitosan in there, it will find and marry up to its negative partners, and we will have clear wine that happens afterwards. Similar to Kiesersolve, chitosan should be added gently and stirred for about 20 seconds before allowing it to settle. The wine should be left undisturbed for at least 12 to 48 hours, and the clarification process at this time will be observed through the glass carboys, and you're going to see a visible line where that wine starts to settle. Another product that's added to the wine is called potassium sorbate. This is a stabilization product. Potassium sorbate is used to inhibit yeast production. It is included in the wine kits to stop any re-fermentation in the bottles, if there is any residual sugars left in the must. This is the way that the wine kit manufacturers use to rush the winemaking process along. If you extend the period of time before you bottle by a couple months, you can leave this product out. Sorbate over time will break down and cause flavors of pineapple and celery to form in your wine, which isn't always desirable, especially in the reds. So this completes lesson 3. In the lesson 3 practical video, which is next in the series, we will cover the addition of adding the finding agents to the wine, stabilization products to the wine, and we will make up a 2.5% solution. And we will also cover some of the optional winemaking equipment that can be useful to own. The link in the top right-hand corner of the screen is going to take you to the course playlist that I talked about earlier. Click on it and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can find the other videos in this series. If you've already done this, just ignore the link and enjoy the rest of the series. Thank you for watching.